Okie doke, I think I'm ready to do this live. Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who love to talk about movies as much as they love watching them. And that would be me, of course, my wonderful co-host, Mr. Jim Chaboyko, and you fine folks. So let's get into it. But before I do that, I just want to give everyone a heads up. Of course, I was away for a few weeks. We did do a live stream on the road, and that was the first season of The Rings of Power. You'll notice it is not up on the channel anymore. We had some serious audio problems for people who are listening to it in their speakers, but if they're listening into their headphones, it was fine. It was all very weird. But anyway, I'm going to fix that, and I should have it back up on the channel in the next few days. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about today's show, All Quiet on the Western Front. A bit of a bummer of a movie. That said, where's my show notes? Here we are. Okay, everyone. Apparently war does suck. Who knew? But here's the log line I cobbled together from Wikipedia. It's set in the closing years of World War I. It follows the life of German soldier Paul Bäumer, who, after enlisting in the German army with his friends, finds himself exposed to the realities of war. It was directed by Edward Berger, written by Ian Stokell and Lesley Paterson, and then also by Mr. Berger, based on the book of the same name by Erich Maria Remarque. Stars Felix, Kammerer, Albrecht, Schuch, Aaron Hilmer, Moritz, Klaus, Edin, Hasanovic, and Adrian Grünewald, Grünewald, I believe. Anyway, also stars Thibaut de Montalembert, David Strizo, and Daniel Broyle. First, we'll go to the social nutrition checklist. And would it get a reframe stamp? No, it would not. Is it union made? I'm really not sure. It was shot in the Czech Republic. I don't know. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. So I can't give it a check mark for that. Did it pass the Bechdel test? I don't believe one woman had a speaking line in it, so no. And last but certainly not least, is it class conscious? I am going to argue it is, but we'll circle back to that with Jim later. Let's get from that. Let's go back to here and let's talk about historicity. There was, and you can find this online, they certainly had to cut a fair chunk out of the book. But when we're talking about historicity, we're really talking about the film and the book. Its basis in historical fact. It is set in World War I. It purports to be a soldier's story. The original writer, Remarque, was a trooper in World War I. So he has that. I think when we look at its accuracy, one of the things we have to look at is if you look at the reception of the book itself. It came out in 1928 in Germany. Well, the Nazis didn't like it. But other, let's say, right-wing powers labeled it as a anti-war propaganda, which kind of kills me. Even in England, the United States, I'm sure Canada, I couldn't find any evidence, but mostly the pushback was in Germany. Of course, you had the Nazis and other right-wingers, but you also had other soldiers saying, listen, he may not have fought for God and country, but I did. I was fighting for my home. I was fighting for my family. And, it's kind of, I can sort of maybe question, but it's tough to question another soldier's, response to it. Another patient, a fellow patient of Remarque's in the military hospital he ended up in, didn't like the negative depictions of the nuns and patients. And, quote, there was protecting their family, whom this will to protect their homeland gave the strength to endure any extremities. There's a great Wikipedia discussion of it, and I do have a link in the description. That said, I think one of the great things about a movie like this, it is an opportunity to explore further. And so with that, I also got a few videos that I found that I think people might, if they want to take a deeper dive. Screen Rant did a truth versus fiction video. It's a nice 10-minute light read of, hey, did this character exist? Did that character exist? What about this battle, that battle? Uniform, stuff like that. Check it out. Real History, and that's REEL, as in a film reel. Real History did a much deeper dive, about a 40-minute video. That guy, he's an actual historian. I'd recommend that one to you. Now, here's another, and this is more about World War II or World War I and the war in general. The historian Margaret Macmillan, a Canadian historian actually, she wrote a great book, an accessible, more pop history book, Paris 1919, 6 Months That Changed the World. It certainly changed my view of World War I, and I strongly recommend it. The National Film Board of Canada actually did a docudrama based on that book, Paris 1919, and it's on YouTube, complete, on the National Film Board's channel. I've got a link to that in the description. Another couple of books I'd recommend, again, depending on how deep you want to dive into this stuff, is former war correspondent Chris Hedges, War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning. Great book. I'm actually rereading it again as we speak. And then another excellent book, and the new version, the most up-to-date version, is from Canadian historian and journalist Gwyn Dyer, and it's just called War, the New Edition. Another great book on the history, let's say the history of war, and how integrated it is in our, let's say, our historical lives. All those, there are either links to the videos or articles, and then just the title and name of the books I suggest you take a look at if you want to dive deeper into this fascinating subject that I would argue, or not just will, over the course of this chat with my co-host, still affects us today, the results of this war. Anyway, with that out of the way, I think it is time to bring on my co-host with the most, Mr. Jim Chaboyko. How are you, my friend?
How's it going? Good. Yeah, just gearing up for another winter. The snow is falling outside and looks like it's pretty sticky. But anyway, welcome back to you as well. Back to the hemisphere.
Thank you very much. Yes, I. As a matter of fact, I was fortunate enough to have a wonderful trip overseas. Visited some great places fraught with history such as this, including Germany, which a country I have over the last several years fallen in love with, actually. And yeah, to be at some of the places that this film, let's say, covers, is kind of interesting. I love France. I love Germany, and this movie is like, and here's another view. Anyway,
Yeah.
Jim, I did briefly want to I wanted to get your reaction, and this is on the
Sure.
one of those things, part of the historicity, and yeah, I was like, again, yeah, a lot of Austrian soldiers forbidden from reading the book. Czechoslovakia banned it from its military libraries. The Italian translation was, of course, banned by Mussolini in 1933. The Nazis, as they're rearming Germany post their election, banned it as it was counterproductive to German rearmament. But one of its criticisms was by a Dr. Karl Kroner, who was concerned about Remarque's depiction of the medical personnel as being inattentive, uncaring, or absent from frontline action. And he thought it would perpetuate German stereotypes abroad that had subsided since the First World War. It's obviously a quote from the interwar years. He offers the following clarification. People abroad will draw the following conclusions. If German doctors deal with their own fellow countrymen in this manner, what acts of inhumanity will they not perpetuate against helpless prisoners delivered up into their hands, or against the populations of occupied territory? It's like, oh, that did not age well.
As a eugenicist, this makes me feel bad.
Oh, that's dark and funny.
That's, and I was thinking, post this movie, what awaits the survivors is some pretty rocky years. So, if they manage to survive, but we'll deal with that in the spoiler zone after the spoiler zone. Yeah. So,
okay. Before we get into that, why don't we quickly say hello we got an active chat. So let's say hello. First of all, we got, if I can actually get it up here. Bear with me, everyone.
Well, hello, everyone.
Oh, you know what? I'm blowing this here.
Uh-oh.
That's what I wanted to do. There we go. DMG is in the house.
Hey.
Oh,
Nevada.
One of my fellow travelers, Ms. Katie Fowler. And of course, as is what usually happens, Richard L. also in the house. Great to see you. Oh, tuning in from Toronto today. Very cool, Richard. Oh, that's even later than it is usually. Well, good to see you, Richard. Thanks for tuning in. And this is finally just watched Nope on the plane. OMG, wow, right?
Yeah.
Right? Well, great. Glad you got to see it. And then what else do we got? Oh my goodness. Winnipeg Globetrotters have as many trick shots as the Harlem Globetrotters. Yeah. I got a few pictures. I did catch magic once or twice while I was overseas. Best trick is the craft dinner. And last but certainly not least, we do have Walt 65 from Walt's Flicks Picks. Great to see you here, Walt. Gwyn Dyer, a.k.a. Grim and Dyer. I don't know, I wouldn't say that, but
I love Luke Gwendar. He used to have a show on the CBC that ran all the time. He's one of those guys you'd be playing with your Lego guys with one with one eye on that and then one eye on the TV, thinking, "Man, grown-ups are smart." That was my takeaway. But
DMG asking if there are any Tim Hortons overseas. That's an excellent question, and I could, you answer away, Jim.
Well, I was just going to mention that gelatinous jelly duck. I was gelatinous mallard. He actually posted a picture from where is he again? Qatar? No, did I get that right? Yeah, Qatar. Yeah, they have one in Qatar.
Not he's not in Qatar. He's in Kuwait City.
Kuwait, yes, that's right. Yeah. Sorry, my apologies. But they also have the Tim Hortons script in red, and then they have it in Arabic in red. Which
of course.
I'm like, oh God, there has to be merch. Please let there be merch. But apparently there's not. So,
sigh.
Yeah.
All right, Jim. Let's you know what? Let's just jump right into it. Let's go right into the spoiler zone, if that's cool with you.
Okay.
The spoiler zone. All right. And why don't we... There's something I wanted to ask you. What do you think makes a great war movie? And I'm putting that out to the chat as well. What do you folks think makes for a great war movie? And Jim, you don't necessarily have to answer that right now unless something immediately comes to mind. This is maybe something we can answer over the course of our conversation. But that kind of occurred to me.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I'll just maybe start the ball rolling. I think you have to feel like you've been through something. Like you can't. There's no good war movies that are kind of shrug. That you're neither here nor there about. I think they have to either be kind of arduous in a way, like you've been through an ordeal almost. And picked up something from that. I remember seeing Saving Private Ryan in the theater, and that was one of the first ones that really sort of glorified war, like that really sort of made it as bloody. It wasn't just a shot to the chest and a fall over. It was people being eradicated, and that was very we got home and I wanted my son to sleep with us in the bed. He was about a year old at the time, so that was kind of the feeling there. So yeah. How about you? What do you think is a good ingredient?
It has to have an opinion, whether it's pro or anti-war, or and I know this sounds like it's not having an opinion. I'm down with the war movie that's like, no, we're going to ask questions. We're going to force the audience to think about what they really think about it. I'm okay with that as well. But pick a lane and stay in that lane. I think that's one of the key ingredients. I'm thinking, as a matter of fact, this week, Cody and I are going to get together and do kind of our favorite war movies. And a number of them, I think there's some great movies that are pro-war, great anti-war movies. And I can enjoy both. I can know what the pro-war movie's doing, and I can, let's say, not agree with it, but I can also admire it's like still great entertainment, and it's just a really good movie and a good, let's say, proponent of its position, Then there's other movies that I think, oh, you're a Weasley and you're examining this unironically. The Guns of Navarone is one where I would say, yeah, this is a pretty crappy war movie, as a matter of fact. Anyway, that would be one of them. This is one, Walt, come and see, that I want to get on. Jim, I want Jim and I to do this film. Probably not in the next little bit. Come and see, that's one set in Lithuania, I believe. Jim?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've talked
Yeah,
about
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Harrowing is right. Comedy gold. Another zinger from, oh, wait. Oh, no, I hit the wrong one. Sorry. So nothing zingery about that Walt 65 comment. It's this one I was thinking about.
Right.
One thing about great war films is they show the horrible realities of war and make you understand these deeds are done by ordinary human beings. That's a great point. Definitely would go on that list of what makes a great war movie. All right. Jim, let's talk about, now that we've done that, let's talk about craft.
Sure.
And yeah, what did you think of, like, there were choices early in the film. And one of it was, I put it under pacing, but, you know, just the way they had never had a problem, just show the action as it's happening. The camera doesn't move a lot. The editing is slow. Like long shots, like as you would say, letting it breathe. There's a lot of that there. What did you think of that? Those choices they made, or is that something you noticed at all? Like,
yeah, you know, it did start off like it did take its time, but not in a sort of an onerous way, or not in a kind of
I'm not
maybe a
even
little
talking.
bit
I'm not
artsy,
talking
but
about the
no.
story
Yeah,
pacing of events happening. I'm just
but just
talking
the
about the way the
shots.
camera, the
Yeah,
editing,
yeah.
even the performances. Like, it's all very, the actor just emotes, is just being there. The shot just sits. You'll see the action take place, and when I say the action, the activity, like action. Okay, actor does this, extras are doing that, horse goes by. That was
Long
more what I was
shots.
getting after.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of long shots.
Like some of those back, I think there was speaking of horses, there's a silhouette, and there's, you know, I guess he was a messenger boy, or maybe on his way to school, and he was on his bike, and, you know, even the shot of the foxes, which is maybe, you know, foxes sleeping, and that was
Yeah,
either the
the
second, third, or
vixen.
fourth
Oh,
shot.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think it was the
of
second of
yeah,
them
of the
just sitting
movie.
in a
There
den.
was the woods, and then the foxes,
Yeah.
yeah, and then it sort of carried on. So yeah, some very interesting choices. It's sort of, in a way, I those first few beats, I thought, is this going to be like Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line, which was a little bit about man and a little bit about nature. You know, it just, you know, the men happened to be surrounded by this nature, and I thought that was, and it did a little bit of that, but yeah, it's very deliberate, I think, and you know, it set you, that with the music, that there was a
Yes.
three note, that dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
There's that note that it kept on going back to, and so not even that was very crowded. Like there was nothing about this except for the combat scenes. None of the shots were very crowded or rushed. It felt like, you know, it just took its. I mean, it's a 2.5 hour long movie, but yeah, it went by pretty quickly, I thought.
Coming back to the music, what did you think? Like, some of their choices, I noted it. I wrote it down. Of course, my notebook's somewhere over there now. But I wrote it down. I was like, wow, even when the music, or even when they're having fun, you know, there's not quite the midpoint to the film. They've stolen that goose, or not goose, swan, whatever. Some big ass fucking bird.
I think it was a goose. I think it was a goose. Yeah.
Yeah. They've boosted that goose, and they're cooking it up, and they're having, it's the most joy we've seen in any of the performers since the beginning of the movie. But if you hear the music cue, it ain't a dance number.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the clouds are sort of amassing behind them or something,
Yeah.
something along those lines. Yeah, it was a momentary reprieve. They were allowed this one sort of victory, stealing the goose from the farmer, which totally won't come back to haunt them. Yeah, no, there were some really interesting choices. We'll talk about it a little bit in the story. What's interesting too is what they left out of the typical war movie, which we can discuss if that
Which
was
I think,
well-placed thing or not.
yeah, that's it. No, they left it out, and they also left it out stuff from the book. But let's put a pin on that. I got one more question.
Yeah.
On craft, what did you think? What did you think of the performances? Was there any that stood out to you, where you go, "Wow, that"? Because it's a lot of younger men in this.
Yeah.
Anyone where you're like, "Wow, I can't wait to see more from this performer."
There was. I was going to say that I remember, and it was only after I watched this that I remember the 1979 version with Richard Thomas from the Waltons and Ernest Borgnine. And
Ernest Borgnine.
He was the cat character, so he was sort of the mentor for all the other kids. Richard Thomas was probably close to 30, but he played a young, like in his 20, probably teen on the verge of early 20s. But the age gap here was between the actors was like 40 years. This cat is in his 30s. He's older and grizzled, and he's illiterate, and he's a shoemaker in a village somewhere. I thought he was amazing. I thought that there was a scene, oddly enough, when they're in the latrine, the unwalled latrine, which makes me uncomfortable, but they were talking with each other, and it was
another nature shot though too. Far away from the village, and all of a sudden they're just sitting on their ass, literally.
Yeah, and it was a great scene, and it was sort of a transformative scene in the relationship between those two characters. Kat revealed that he had a child that passed away, and I thought, whoa, this guy. The cast was uniformly really good at what they did, but the guy who played Kat, Albrecht Schuch, I think his name was, Schuch. I thought I would love to see
Schuch. I would love at the end, I think. Whatever. Anyway, continue.
Apparently he's in Bad Banks, which I understand is on Netflix, unless I'm wrong. But I'd love to see more from that guy, and I sort of want to show him to my daughter because I think she'd think he was pretty hunky. But I thought he was I thought he was great. I really,
and he's
37. A lot of soul. Yeah, a lot of soul in his delivery and his eyes, and you could sort of tell he brought a lot to the role.
Yeah. No.
How about you? Was there anybody that stood out?
No, we're just moving on. I rest assured, Jim, if I have something to say, I will say it.
Sure.
All right, let's get out of craft and into story. And you're gonna say you wanted to talk about some of the things they left out. That's usually in a typical war movie, I think. Why don't you riff on that?
Yeah, even in this one, like, take a look at any of these following the troops through their war journey movies, like Band of Brothers or series, Band of Brothers, or the early version of All Quiet on the Western Front, etc., etc. They typically go to training camp together, and there's not really a training camp sequence. There's a longer one in the first movie,
and in the book.
Yes, and in the book, and there's also there's a meeting the local girls scene, which you see in movies like Fury, and I think you see in a little bit in Band of Brothers and things like that. There's none of that here, and as you were saying earlier, no speaking parts for women in this movie, which is a little wasn't great. But anyway, so they skip by that, I guess, because they were dealing with other. They brought in all the stuff that happened, all the diplomatic work was sort of a new angle that they hadn't shown in the 79 version. I haven't seen the 1930 version with Lou Ayres, so but that necessitated, I guess, cutting some. It would be 4 hours long otherwise. But yeah, it did miss. I think, purposely skip out a couple of
Oh,
the beats that we usually see in a kind of a troop's origin story,
yeah.
for lack of a better term.
Well, and it was in the book. You do meet his family,
Yes. Yeah.
Bäumer's family. Whereas here, we don't meet his family. He is like, it's just, we don't even see, and I wonder if they even, part of me suspects they shot it and then decided to cut it. And I'm okay with that choice. But the whole, my dad wouldn't sign the paper that would let me, child, go to
Good
war.
Point,
What did you think then of, going back to the women? I think that's why they had to have that little moment where, I want to say wasn't Ludwig, it was Franz, the one who gets the kerchief, you know, with the woman's perfume, or the smell of her, but perfume. The ladies' man. I think that's why they had that moment of where he's, see you boys later, you know, just to kind of bring that in. Do you think that worked as well? Is there any of these things that they didn't have, you think, you know what, they could have ditched something else and they should have had it in? I'm fine with the killing the training montage.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's been done. I mean, when it's done well, like Band of Brothers, it's an amazing way to start it off, because it's sort of what brings them together, and there's a real reason. But I'm okay with that. I sort of wish there was one speaking part for a woman, but you know, you can't have everything. I sort of wondered too.
Just a sec, Jim. Sorry to interrupt, but I think we need to note, sexfind.biz is in the house.
Oh.
Apparently, we can find their private photo somewhere for free.
They seem friendly. I make so many friends on the internet.
Anyway, oh wow, red heart, love letter, just
wow,
really wanting to let us know about their availability. You know, isn't
coming
that
in fat,
sweet?
coming in hot,
coming in hot. Oh, it looks like the system's already deleted them out.
Oh my gosh, that was quick.
You know, the content moderation is a thing on YouTube. May not be on another social platform. Anyway, sorry about that. Continue.
You know, I was reading the Wikipedia entry for the 1979 version, and it describes their meeting with local girls as they with their consent they all hook up, or something to that effect. But it took pains to say with their consent, because these situations can get kind of gross and rapey. And like Fury, I don't know if you remember the Fury, but that was a very tense segment, and I did not love that part of it. And so maybe it was just a way to, hey, we'll head this off at the pass. We'll film it from 100 meters away, and then he'll disappear for 5 hours.
And we'll also save bucks on some speaking roles.
Yes, there you go. Yeah.
But you know what? It's interesting. I wonder if that's one of those things where because we're now so sensitized to that issue, we're aware of it now. I gotta admit, like, as soon as I saw the three women coming along and the guys watching, and it's like, oh, this is gonna get weird.
Yeah.
You know, like and it doesn't, and I see why they didn't do that. But I was like, immediately, I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. You know what? Maybe leave that up to the chat.
Yeah.
What did you think of the whole final sequence? Basically from I'm going to do my best not to color. What did you think of the final sequence? Say from the point the general is complaining to his aide-de-camp, his adjutant, about the war and how it's been too long since the last war and his dad fought for Bismarck, blah, blah, blah. Up to the we are in the spoiler zone, folks, up to the death of Paul Bäumer.
Mm-hmm.
That sequence. What did you think of that?
Yeah, the posters, the one that we have to the side of us here too, and the other shot of poor Paul. They're both from that that sort of, okay, I've just lost hope segment. The last, basically the final act of the movie. So that kind of gives things away, but it does, I think, a fairly good job of making war, sort of de-glamorizing war. But there are a few neato shots, and he gets better at fighting. Certainly not the stabbing the French soldier to death in the bomb crater. That wasn't. There was nothing about that, but there was sort of more when the tanks attacked, and there was like a swirling kind of a camera that was, guys were on bridges shooting down into the trenches. That in a way was kind of a neato moment that I think you maybe defeated a little bit of the purpose. It didn't kill the movie for me at all, but I thought, well, this looks kind of cool. We should it. And Paul gets more competent. I mean, he's been fighting for 2 years now.
Yeah. It jumps from his first battle to 18 months later.
Well,
November
that's the other
7th.
thing too. That was a huge time jump. They went from their own opening minutes in the war to losing the guy with glasses. And can I say, why is it always the guy with glasses? So that friend is out the door, and then 18 months later, they're all still alive, all still together. They've bonded, and they've all gotten kind of competent, whereas they weren't before. So I thought that time jump was a little bit like crazy to me. But the last segment, it was on the verge of sort of defeating its purpose of de-glamorizing it. But yeah, the futility, I think, was still there. And you saw it through the soldiers that just arrived. You saw it through their eyes. Hey, kid, he's given the same duty. The redhead is given the same duty. Go collect the dog tags. And you just see the sort of the defeat. And there's that sort of, the most interesting thing I think about the final act is once armistice had been established, they weren't enemies any longer, but they didn't even register each other. They were just sort of passing each other in the trenches. All the French and German soldiers were just sort of doing their own thing. And that was sort of that an otherworldly, surreal kind of segment. So I thought that was kind of effective, like effectively weird.
Yeah, there are some nice moments in that, like the denouement. Like we've had the climax. Now it's all okay, how is this going to play out? I enjoyed, especially after we see the French as either, heartless bastards or flamethrowing using heartless bastards, that there's that little bit of a moment with the French sergeant and one of his staff, hey, one of our guys bought it and saved the wine or whatever the hell the drink was. That little bit of humanity to kind of take the sting out of their presentation otherwise. And that isn't, I mean, what, I think it's one of the points of the film is the cruelty is going on all around. We do see our hero brutally kill people. Brutally. For myself though, I at the end of it, I'm like, this sucks a lot to have the German Friedrichs, the German General Friedrichs, to be almost like a cartoon villain. Like, I understand the place he sort of fits in the story as one of these. There were generals like him, so it's not totally wrong, but he's almost cartoonish. And the way he gets everyone together, and this is the way Bäumer dies, is the villainous, selfish act of an asshole. Instead of the way he dies in the book, it's just yet another pointless death. Even the cat, his character's death, also, again, all in that denouement where he dies because of the place they keep raiding for food, and it's like, really, this is, I mean, I think it would have been more effective if he died earlier in the film the first time they did it. So all of a sudden it takes away the joy of, or I don't know, like that didn't work as well for me, but I really didn't like that last bit where it's like, oh, they all just go marching off to war, getting shot at. And it's like, you know, instead of more just that, the way people would die in the story otherwise is just their shitty luck that day. Because all of a sudden that end, and it's like, well, no, we can pin it on that guy. That guy was a bastard, and therefore they died. And it's like, you know, it sort of goes against the grain of the where we've been led so far by this story. Like, I mean, they could have had him. I think that was almost like the writers kind of going, okay, well, what do? We need to show these. We do need to show how these, or well, did they even need to? Like, one of the great things about the book is it's so focused on the soldier, his experiences, without getting into what's going on at headquarters. You know, did they need it? Anyway, I really, that was the only part that, and what was otherwise, like, I think a very well told story. I loved the pacing of it. I loved the fact, and I think that was not just a choice, a craft choice, but a story choice. The idea that, no, we're going to sit with this. We're going to see that Frenchman choke on, you know, choking on the dirt he shoved in his mouth to, you know, we're going to see that. We're going to sit with it as he was sitting with it. You know, I loved those moments. I loved what otherwise in a lot of war movies, they don't sit with that. They'll just kind of go, oh, well, and then he died and it was terrible. Look, he has his moment and then he moves on, you know, cut to next scene. And it's like, no, we're all forced to squirm. And yeah, the last, it is the denouement. It's not even the last act. It's just that, you know, where it's like, okay, Cartoonville, you know, why isn't he twirling his mustache? You know,
the French guy was smoothing out his mustache, and
that was a hell of a mustache.
Yeah, it was.
You know, there was a handsome dude.
The only thing I would say about the German general, though, is that he might have been a placeholder for the next 20 years in Germany. Like, you know, because nothing dissipated after the 11th. You know, it wasn't the 12th. Everyone didn't calm down. It was just like, you know, this is just the first part, folks. And that anger and that sort of
the false narrative of the stab in the back. It was those social democrats who did it to us. It's like, no, you assholes, you did it.
Yeah.
The high command, Ludendorff, Hindenburg, they all did. And then they're like, oh, this is not going to go the way we want it to go. Let's get the politicians in now. You know? Yeah. Interesting note, by the way, folks. Broil plays, what is his name? Matthias Erzberger, who, real guy, and was shot to death by one of those guys. He was labeled as one of the November criminals, and both the Conservative Party and the National Liberal Party, the right-wing political parties of the day, labeled him as one of the traitors who signed the armistice. You know, even though it's like, let's get out the politician. We need a fall guy. The military is basically going, we need a fall guy. Let's shove those guys in who were telling us 2 years ago we should bail out of this disastrous war we've gotten ourselves into. It's like, nope, we could use you now. Because we don't want to be anywhere near this thing we're going to blame you for.
And then, you know, even down to the very train car that they signed the armistice in, Adolf got his mitts on that as well. And didn't he destroy the car? I think he did something with it. But he kept it just sort of as a little angry souvenir.
Yeah. Oh, for where they...
The actual train car.
Which was owned by... what the hell was his name? Foch. That was his personal property.
Yeah.
Because You know, a time, well, not that it's that different now, but definitely of a time when, well, of course, General, of course you're rich. This is not somebody coming up from the working class suburb of Montmartre, you know, hard scrabble and earned his promotions. This is the same leadership that thought that they're just like, you know what, we've got a spy problem. Let's blame the Jew, Dreyfus. You know, the whole Dreyfus thing. It's generated from the same assholes. You know?
My other train is a Lamborghini. You got that bumper sticker on your less nice train.
Yeah.
But
just before we move on, actually, a couple of items, everybody. First of all, of course, if you haven't already, little ringy dingy, please like and subscribe. That's right. Ring that bell so you get notified. I would also say, of course, you can follow Jim and I on Instagram and Twitter. There
we go.
But what else? Yes, Jim, maybe before we get into the chat, why don't you tell us about the next movie?
Well, in keeping with the Remembrance Day theme, we're going to be taking a look at Passchendaele. Canadian movie, folks. To all our American friends, we make movies here too. And one of them's called Passchendaele, and it's about the 1918 World War II battle. I think it was close to the end. So I won't ascribe a year to it yet in case I'm wrong. But
no, it's World War One.
It is World War. No, did I say two?
Yeah,
I meant one.
Yeah.
But there we go.
And this would be more in the. Well, you know what? We're gonna have that conversation.
Yeah.
It was directed and starred.
Paul Gross.
His name again? Thank you. Who also, if folks remember, last year we did. Last year, Jim and I looked at Hyena Road. Another Canadian war movie about the Canadian military war experience in Afghanistan in this century, not 2 centuries ago. Although you could argue it's still part of the so-called Great Game. All right, everybody. Now that let's get out of that and back to this flick. But I also we've got some great comments in the chat before we move into meaning. And I wanted to bring one of them up. Walt 65 says, it is interesting that this film is released at a time when Germany ponders a bigger military for the first time since 1945, in part due to the Ukraine war. Yeah, that is fascinating. The probably Germany's most fraught. It's fraught politically there. Almost not quite, but almost a third rail in German politics. You've got always been a very strong peace movement there. The Green Party is a big. Or I think their leader, the current chancellor, is from the Green Party, part of the governing coalition. But then there's also crazy right-wingers from the former East Germany, Saxony, that are going, Putin's the guy. Because, for fuck's sakes, of course. Anyway, that's a great comment, Walt. What else do we have here? This is another one from Walt 65. Jim, I was curious what you thought about this. He talks about the classic tension for anti-war films as the scale of war is, quote, impressive, close quote, even as you show how horrible it is.
Yeah, I mean, impressive and sort of inhuman as well. I mean, the whole, all the stuff with the sort of the industrial handling of the clothing at the very start, where they would just take the boots and the clothing, the greatcoats, throw them in a pile, launder them, and fix up literal bullet holes, which is just so sinister. And then the guy said, "Oh, I got somebody's other, Paul, our hero, says, I got somebody else's uniform." And they said, "Oh, that was just a mistake." And he throws the label on the
Too
ground.
big or too small.
Yeah, too small. Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Just
And you see it falling like a leaf amongst all the other labels of the people who died in them. So, I think, it's hard not to go big in something with millions of people. But I think I think that sort of like that dehumanizing process of even clothing the guys was sort of well handled. And they started off with that. Like, that's how it sort of began. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Another comment I wanted to okay, this is first of all, that's just funny. You always need a fall guy. Look at the Kremlin these days. You know what? It is kind of the standard thing of the powerful when they really F up. It's like, which guilty bastard are we marching in to take the heat for this disaster? All right, but I think here's a good comment. Perhaps the generals were a nod to Paths of Glory. I think that's a good comment, Walt. And I also do kind of get why they put in that, when this came out in 1930, people were the very first adaptation, when the book came out in 28, originally serialized in a German
that's right.
newspaper. Everyone would have known that political stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't need to be part of this narrative. In a way, it was like saying, listen, war is the experience of these poor bastards. We get to go fight it. And I think that, whereas here we're more than 100 years now removed.
Mm-hmm.
To put those generals in, to put the political stuff in, I think was important just for a lot of viewers who might not be familiar with the historicity. You needed that little bit of, hey, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
It also does heighten the tragedy of his death, that, people were dying on November 11th. They were, all the players did think, it's like they were still right up to that time jockeying for position, because they figured, well, there'll be a big negotiation. It's just a ceasefire, really,
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I think that was good. What else? Richard L. Says, was it the same car where Hitler got Paris to sign their surrender to Germany in World War II?
Yeah,
I believe it was.
The deal, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and there's or we could have just looked down one more comment. Well, yes. Yeah, Hitler used the same car when France fell and then destroyed it when it looked bad for Germany. There we go. We got the full. Great. I'll come back to that later. Richard L., of course, is talking about, he was close to Ypres, Belgium, where Richard and Katie recently were. And Katie's back, apparently. Her power went out. Good to have you back. Really? Putting on the red stuff. Oh, my goodness. The zingers. Okay. Walt 65. This is what I thought he meant. Impressive by the scale of armies, all the equipment, bombardments. It's big. War is great for film, because now that's conflict. Like the stakes are high and it's super technological, like the tank scene, and the horror of those tanks coming up was, like I totally get that. Then he's like, that is the whole theme of Pork Chop Hill. Not 100% sure.
I don't know if
where the comment is. Hamburger Hill. I remember that. That was a great Vietnam War movie. Pork Chop Hill.
I will look it up.
But I'm not sure what the reference, what is like, that is the whole theme. I'm not sure what the reference is. All right. Anyway, let's move on. Speaking of meaning and themes and that, let's get into the themes of this one, Jim.
Yes.
What do you think? Do you think this is anti-war propaganda?
Well, propaganda is a little strong. I mean, let's see. An entire class and all the friends get wiped out. So, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's anti-war, and I think it's an effective anti-war movie. Propaganda suggests that it would be unrealistic, and I don't know that it is. I mean, I obviously wasn't there, but yeah, there was a lot of these early wars were pretty. I mean, they killed millions of people, and even the people that survived didn't do so well. We had a great uncle in our family that was apparently he was at all these battles. We read a list out of the battles that we found a document, and he was like, at the Somme, at this, at that, the other thing. And he was not a happy man. He was not known as a happy man. So, yeah, I think it told the story, and I think it did it well. I don't necessarily think it's blowing any smoke or anything like that. So,
no.
Yeah. Did you think it was? Would you call it propaganda, or would you?
Well, you know what, I think I find that hilarious.
Yeah.
When I think of propaganda, I really do think of, the state going, okay, what narrative do we need to achieve certain policy goals? What things do we need to cover up? And then while we're covering up one thing, we're promoting another. The United States had some great propaganda war movies. Canada did as well. The West in general during World War II. They were, this is why we're fighting. This is why these people are our friends. This is why these people are our enemies. We saw it. Heck, Dr. Seuss himself, created some wonderful, incredibly racist things of anti-Asian, anti-Japanese propaganda. When I think of anti-war, that's usually not where the big money is, where the state's power is being exercised. Gwyn Dyer actually, I think it's in the foreword of the preface, he says, listen, war isn't really part of our prehistory, but it is part of our history. And the state and war go hand in hand. And so when you think of propaganda, I do think of it as the powerful trying to sell some bullshit on the rest of us. That isn't to say that, let's say, movements can't have their own, narrative where they're going to skip this. Chris Hedges in War is the Force That Gives Us Meaning talks about his experience in El Salvador and post-Somoza Sandinista Nicaragua, where you're like, well, everyone can participate in no, everything's fine here, and let's trot, like a Potemkin Village-esque efforts to win hearts and minds. Mm-hmm. That said, I think propaganda is definitely a tool of powerful actors to get their will, whereas if people had actually, they're fully aware of all the facts, would probably go, we don't want to do what you want to do. Is it an anti-war film? Is it? Hell yeah. You know what? Yeah. And I think a remarkably effective one. I love what Walt brought it up. Apocalypse Now, you could make a good argument that Coppola was making an anti-war movie. And it is a great war movie, but soldiers like watching it. They love the Kurt's character is not necessarily seen as the bad guy. They love
cool.
the Duvall's character. His name I can't remember, but, I love the smell of napalm in the morning. Like, I remember when I was in the militia, that was a popular effing movie. Like, an incredibly popular movie. It's incredibly difficult. And Walt's right. It's a tension within what you would say is an anti-war movie, because it's so easy to make great film with big scope and all the things that film does really well, and but I think this one pulled it off in a way much better, notwithstanding the cartoon villainy of the last German general. And yeah, I agree with everyone who's got there's a bit of a nod here and you kind of need it. And, I think it sort of took some of the poignancy and the tragedy of Bäumer's death. If they could have killed him a different way, I think it would have been more effective. Maybe there's another way to show these generals as ridiculous villains that they were, incompetent villains that they were. But
his death in the 79 movie, and this is the interesting or the good aspect about this movie, is that when you do another version, you have a different interpretation, which is kind of cool, because now you have multiple interpretations. And this is the first since the book. This is the first German one, because the last two movies have been American. But in the 79 movie, and I remember this as a bird watcher, is that the Richard Thomas character, the young idealistic guy, he's a sketcher, like he's an illustrator, and he stands up to get a bird in a tree, and he wants to get a better look, and he gets shot in the head. So it's a lot more of a passive death than being right in the heat of battle. So different interpretation too of that, and that's kind of interesting, is to have multiple interpretations. It's always kind of a rich exercise in my mind, anyway.
Yeah. Of course, can I fucking find, pardon my poor language, it's Lieutenant Colonel ...
Kilgore.
Is it Kilgore? Are we sure of that?
I just looked it up, yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So, Walt, you are correct. It is Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore. Tom Hanks, World War II CGI. I think he's referring to, what is that? Greyhound. The Greyhound or Greyhound? Okay.
I think it's just Greyhound.
I enjoyed that film, and I thought the graphics were done well. Huh. You know what? But I think DMG has a very high standard when it comes to visual effects. If it does not meet that, those are big points off. But Walt figures the U-boats were very cartoony. Anyway, they didn't take me out of the movie. But let's get back to this one. Jim, did you find any note, like another thing that I think war movies can do, that there's we're pro-war, patent, that's a full-on war is a great thing, while still having enough awareness to kind of sort of examine this character as perhaps crazy, what a great film. This definitely an anti-war film. Then we talked about the ambiguous ones, but then there's the ones that want it both ways. Mm-hmm. Wow, war is terrible. Anyway, let's go do some shooting. And I think that's a mush. But do you think, other than is there anywhere here where you're like, wow, that really doesn't tonally and thematically fit the movie we've been seeing?
Just sort of as I mentioned before, just a little bit of the battle at the end with the sort of the swirling camera and all the sort of the bridges and the trenches and stuff like that. It had this kind of neato factor, which the rest of it didn't really. But yeah, I think it did most of it pretty well. And I think, I think an important aspect too is the gore. I think it's really easy to, like, if all you do is get and you have a hand to the chest and the guy falls over, that's one thing. But having a corpse thrown up in a tree, or having some of those still shots of like handless
And again,
guys
sitting on it, not
Yeah.
just a hint, but then
Yeah.
let's take the shot from a
Yeah.
lot closer. Yeah.
And there was a lot of that in 1919 too. There's like little hidden treats in the mud, like
Are you thinking
parts of bodies.
1917?
So then 1917, I
Yeah.
did it again. 1917, sorry. 1919 was not a very interesting war movie. But anyway, 1917, there's all this
Could have
sort
been
of
a great movie about a strike, but
Yeah, there you go.
yeah.
All the stuff left in the mud and all the the water was. That's why I sort of reacted when our Paul was feeding the French soldier the water from the pond or from the crater. I thought, maybe you don't want to do that, but yeah. So I think that's an important part of it. Just it's horror. It's a horrifying thing, and it's not just guys falling down.
That's there is what I enjoyed about this film, and I think it was like they chose certain symbols that I think also everyone's guilty. I enjoyed going back to where, he's using the dirty water to wash the mouth out, because yeah, he did just shove a bunch of dirt to shut him up. But before that, even as the horror of what he's just done is come to him, then he tries to wash his hands of the blood with the dirt. And it was like, and we have other symbolic moments, the trying to keep the beetle alive, and all these little moments where it's constantly sort of hitting at, whether it be everyone's got blood on their hands. Everyone becomes guilty to these moments of how do we, keep this little bit of nature alive. Also, it isn't shown and even they at times trying to bring in how do they go back home? What are they going to do? How damaged are they? I thought it did a pretty damn good job, and it made Come and See. It reminded me of Come and See, like some of the clips I've seen. Walt may be able to comment better to this. But just the gauntness over time. You go from, yay, war's wonderful, we're going to go, protect the fatherland, to, oh my God, this is fucking terrible, and everybody's crying, to years later is gaunt and like, it's like, are you Walking Dead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even the color of those early hometown scenes, they had the first scenes of battle and the battlefield, and then they went to the hometown where all the kids were getting signed up, and there was a warmth, and there was these beautiful yellow houses. It was summertime. They all had red hats. They everything was very colorful, and that color gets wiped away pretty quick.
Spring.
Yes, yeah.
It felt spring versus the oncoming winter. And even when it's sunny, or even when there's sun later in the film, it's a wan sun. It's the sun we're familiar with here in Canada as winter comes. That sort of, well, I know it's sunny, but it doesn't feel like it. Talking about gore here, Gore's true. The Pacific is less popular than Band of Brothers because it is more honestly gruesome.
Gruesome's a good word, yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of, when I think of Saving Private Ryan
Mm.
and its opening sequence, actually, I want to come back to something Walt said, and this is more of a question for everybody. He had said one of the great things about, and I put the comment up. Maybe I can find. It'll take me 10 minutes finding it, but a thing that makes a movie great is, when other soldiers say, "Yeah, this is," when soldiers validate that as part of their experience. Saving Private Ryan is a very recent example of there was like a ton of pushback. That isn't the way it worked, and then others are saying, what are you talking about? That's exactly the way it worked. And I think Remarque, this is the same pushback that he faced in the late 20s was and other, it's like, listen, I'm talking about my experience. It isn't necessarily universal, but some of us had this shit experience,
Yeah.
And so I would think that as long as some are going, yeah, that felt real to me, it doesn't have to be universally approved.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm kind of curious, Walt, would you accept that qualification, that bit of modification on what you're saying earlier? Yeah, I'm not going to talk about The Walking Dead. Jim, is there anything else you want to add before we move into our own end game here? We are
Regarding meaning, just a few other things that aren't necessarily connected to meaning, but I think they
Comedy
did
Gold from DMG. Sorry,
that's okay. I think they did a good job as to what they were aiming for. Anyway, it'd be interesting to see the German experience, and I think too, always there's the question of why does a particular movie get made? What's the hook? And yeah, this is I think the Germans reclaiming this cinematically.
Yeah.
Because there hadn't been a German version on film before, and I'd be interested to see the reaction.
Yeah. No, that's a great comment. Maybe I'll reach out to German friends. Hey, have you seen it? I didn't. I wasn't even really doing that mental math. I was thinking about other films when I was in Germany, when I was going to Germany, and then of course my narrative is wrapped up in World War. Or like when I think of Germany and war, I think of World War II. Certainly the thing that's more recent to my birth, and also. In a weird way to my family, because my grandfather was a veteran on my mother's side, and had his own traumatic experiences which were never talked about.
Yeah, which is kind of universal almost.
Yeah, and one more thing I think is worth noting before we move into finishing off. Remarque did The Road Back. He wrote a book, and it did become it was also adapted, and about different soldiers, of course, because everyone died in the first one. Every soldier you got to know died. But in that, it's about their experience going back and what they thought of German society that had sent them on this disaster. Anyway, that'll be interesting. All right, let's let me get rid of that. Bear with me. Yeah, Jim, what are we giving Mr. Berger? Is it a pass or a fail?
Oh, yeah, hearty pass. I think he did well.
Yeah, I give this a solid A. Not an A plus. I think that last sequence kind of takes it out of greatness. But is it a great war movie? I could call it a great war movie. And I know I'm getting a little fancy with the word there. Let me try and be a bit more. Yeah, it's a great war movie. Will it be on a top 10 list? Probably not. I would like to see the 1930 version. I would also now, I'm interested in reading the book. But yeah, I give this a solid, it's an A effort.
Could you see yourself watching it again within the next, usually around this time of year, Remembrance Day, you're thinking of war movies. Would you watch it within the next 5 years, do you think?
I think this is one, again, notwithstanding my comments about the ending, which I think take it out of greatness territory, I would not. This is one of those movies where it's like, well, I've seen that. I don't need to be miserable again.
Yeah,
You know, like
yeah.
it is a bummer, and rightly so, Jim. But it's what am I telling you? Did you go, wow, that was all right? Eating popcorn, going, what's going to
Frankly,
happen
yeah.
next? No,
I like my movies to have a lot of death by shovel.
yeah,
You know, that's
exactly.
always fun.
Yeah, I love to see. You can't. It was funny you mentioned him as a hero. He's not a hero. He's the protagonist. He's the guy we're experiencing this through. But it's like, yeah, there are no heroes here. You know, and they all the people we come to enjoy and have some sympathy for die shitty, pointless deaths, which is the point of the story. And yeah, so it's like, yeah, I'll be in no rush to see this again. You know?
Yeah.
That said, I may watch it again. Mostly to, okay, did I really understand it? Maybe after I read the book, maybe after I see the 1930 version, I may want to kind of, okay, let's reassess it. You know? That would be, what about you? Where do you put this? What's your grade?
I mean, yeah, I'd give it an A. One of the questions is, would I rewatch this? But, you know, with the 1930 version out there, I'm actually going to check out the 1979 one on Tubi or wherever I can find it. It's got to be somewhere. But it was actually, I think it won a Golden Globe, even though it was a made for American TV movie. I remembered tons, like the cat on his back getting to the hospital and cat being dead.
Yeah.
You know, there was scenes that I remember. I remembered him sketching the bird and being killed that way. And so a lot of this stuck with me. And I saw it once, probably when I was 12. And it was about a million years ago. So I think they probably did a good job. Having said that, the book, I think I'd like to take a run at the book as well. Throw it under my teetering pile of books to read, including 1919, which is
the one I'm referring to, the Margaret.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was one of this is the first time that because you know what, I may have been a little suspicious of it or a little eye rolly, but this is the first time where it was like, it's like, oh, this whole idea that it was the cruelty of Versailles that created World War II. That was the first time it was questioned. That a historian of held in high esteem by her peers said, well, no, and as a matter of fact, one of the reasons why you add, 25 years later, during World War II, why the Allies were so adamant that it had to be unconditional surrender, is they didn't want a replay of World War I. And that kind of blew my mind. Also, just some of the things that were politically going on there, like just how much our modern world, again, into this century, you could say roots of problems were at Versailles, as these folks were in many respects, like honestly trying to figure out how they rebuild the world after it all just disappeared. I think that worth it there. But again, Jim, if you're not interested in reading the book, there is a 94-minute NFB docudrama.
Yeah.
All right. Let's what grade are you giving Mr. Berger?
Oh, I'll give it an A. Yeah.
Cool.
Give it a nice solid A.
Solid A. Look at that. Solid A from both of us. All right. Final thoughts, and I want to a more solid war movie than The Old Guard. I wouldn't think of The Old Guard as a war movie. So, You're not getting the answer you want there.
Lest we
DMG.
forget.
Oh, that's terrible. Okay. Walt 65 says 1930 version is well worth the watch. And last but certainly not, I'm going to leave the last comment from Walt 65. One more World War I recommendation. Blackadder goes forth.
Yes.
The final, especially the poignant final episode. I will definitely check that out. He also asked about a recent German World War II series. I'm unfamiliar with it, so I couldn't. Yeah. Anyway, with that done, I think we're Jim. Any final thoughts before we shuffle off?
Final thoughts. Yeah, a lot of, there was a lot of nods to other war movies here. I kind of saw a little bit of Apocalypse Now when Daniel Bruhl was watching the one guy eat breakfast. It almost reminded me of the shrimp eating scene. There was little and enough to be like a nod. I think I'm not 100% sure that that's where it came from, but there was. There's elements of Shakespeare I saw in the crater death scene where his face is entirely covered with mud and he looks like a different colored mud and he looks like a different person, maybe a Coriolanus thing.
Almost
there was
Titus
there was,
Andronicus. Julie Taymor's version where he's got that blue mud like woad.
Yeah. And then there was little bits of Thin Red Line. I think the very first shot is echoed by the very last shot. They show a landscape, and then they close with the same landscape. So it's that sort of nature and man kind of thing. And some of the top shots, the top down shots, trucks on the highway, etc. Remind me a lot of this drone footage you're seeing coming out of Ukraine these days too. So, and they mentioned the Ukraine in the notes for the film. A little bit. So yeah, a lot of little interesting bits, I think, echoes from other movies and other sources. So that was kind of interesting.
I'm interested in one of the things I have all million little notes, but I remember, and I think I've talked about this before, but I think it bears repeating because we see a bit of this in this film. J.R.R. Tolkien on leadership, apparently. And I'm gonna snip a little bit out. But the most improper job of any man, ... is bossing other men. Not one in a million is fit for it, and least of all those who seek the opportunity. And I think that's a great note to end on these fucking things that are disasters, that are put on us all by people who sought the opportunity to boss others around. Whether it be the little martinet that we meet in this film at the very beginning, who's, you got to keep your mask on because I'm an asshole. And you're going to die today. You can last, just a big douchebag, right? Or, the cartoon villain area, the generals, but even in our advances, Putin and his cabal of fucking kleptocrats, not that we're much different. We are involved in a war now. We are at war with Russia. It's just we're spending Ukrainian lives. It's like, here, we'll cut you a check. We'll send you gear, Do
the work.
Oh, blood? Yeah. No. And that doesn't mean I think we should. But I'm at least aware enough to kind of go, well, we're at war. We're just not, we'll spend some of our treasure on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're, to quote an Isaac Asimov character, he's talking about violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. And this is World War I. What caused it? Why? most people still can't answer that question, because it's fucking stupid, Anyway, all right, everybody. Thank you all very, very much for making it out tonight. Great chat, great questions, great comments. Really appreciate that. Walt65, so glad you made it. Hope you can come next week too. Love, he is, I think, for any of the movie YouTubers, you've got to have the deepest experience with these war films. Like, I mean, it is in many ways your area of expertise. Not the only thing you look at, but certainly a big chunk of it. Sorry, Jim. Yeah, go ahead.
Credit to Walt, because he just got back from the BC Lions playoff game in Vancouver there. So I thought he'd be crashed out in his BC Lion pajamas at this point, but no, he held through. So thanks. Good to see you. Go Lions. Well, I don't know if I can say go Lions because they play Winnipeg next week. But anyhow, it was good to see them win.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
And there's one more thing from DMG. And yes, thank you very much, Walt, for the good one, the attaboy, and thanks for making it a good one. All right, everybody. Yeah. I will now kind of take that off. Remind everyone to come back next week for Passchendaele, the same Sunday night, 9:45 p.m. Central Standard Time. Of course, we've fallen back. We're now in Standard Time again. And when I say 9:45-ish. This is a network television, folks. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
See ya.
Oh, apparently Walt's still wearing orange. Okay. All right, let's put an end to this.